Hi everyone, my name is Roel. I work in RedHat for the past 11 years, sorry, I shouldn't exaggerate. I was a Java consultant before that. Within RedHat, I transitioned into what RedHat calls a solution architect or pre-sales. And in it, I first covered 3 countries, and then when 2 of them stood on their own, I went to a regional or national focus, I should say. Then I went to FSI because the organization grew even more. And from there on, I actually had a global account under my belt, ING Bank. They're here in Poland as well. And from there on, I went to the dark side and became a manager. So now I'm completely useless and all that stuff. I know what you guys say about managers, and you're all right anyway. So back when I was still useful, I actually had a couple of customers conversations, and at one point I was absolutely done with them. Fuck them all. So I called one of my buddies, the guy on the left in the screenshot, and I vented. I just had to get rid of everything because I was so frustrated. And he said, you know what? That is actually great content to help others avoid making the same mistake. So that's how this presentation was started. So we basically started to talk everybody, hey, let's dial it down to 3 pitfalls and educate people. And people liked it, and they invited us back. So we did another 3. And lo and behold, they invited us back again. So we had to do another 3. And that's what you're getting today. I basically created a presentation. So this first one, as you can see in the bottom, it's from May 2018. So I obviously had to update the slides and see if the things did not change massively. Spoiler alert, they didn't. So that's how I created this talk. And they actually created a mini book, more leaflet, but that is on steroids, about multi-cloud portability, where some of these things that I will be discussing today are described in more detail. Good. So, first question to you guys. Who's this guy? Yes, thank you very much. So most of you are somewhat younger than I am, but close to my age. So this was my hero back in my first 10 years of life because he's a good artist. And I recently was watching a reactor react to some of his music. And one of the things she articulated was how relaxed Michael looked in his performances. Now, if you ever seen anything behind the screens about Michael Jackson, then you knew why he was relaxed. Any guesses? Because he prepped and prepped and prepped and prepped, and he had a great team behind him. Do you recognize any of these folks? No, but I can certainly see because his transition is already horrifying, and the rest of his family is not much better. But no, in fact, the guy on the top left with the white clothes is the choreographer for Thriller, the big known movie clip, right? On the top right, the most rightmost guy is actually the writer of Thriller. So, spoiler, Michael Jackson did not write Thriller. That guy did. And obviously, I forgot his name now, but you can look it up. The guy in the black and white photo on the left is Quincy Jones. He's his producer. He couldn't have made any of his records without Quincy Jones. Bottom left is another of his choreographers, center as well. On the bottom right, bonus points. Who's the guy with the guitar? No. He actually has a link to my home country, as I'm Dutch. So a famous guitarist with a Dutch name? No? Nobody? Van Halen? That's Eddie Van Halen. He basically played the music for Smooth Criminal. So that guitar riff you all know, That's Eddie Van Halen. That's also not Michael. So why am I showing this to you all? So my goal with this presentation is not to amaze you with my superior knowledge of the world and all its beautiful facets. That's not why I'm here. I'm hoping that with the things that I'm showing you here, you can be the equivalent of Michael, which is, no, not the bad guy he apparently was in his private life, but I mean the well-established artist. And then I will be the one behind you, feeding you the information. That's sort of how I see this presentation go. Yeah? Cool. So, before we start, and that is actually the very first thing I say to all my customers, before you start, stop and think. And unfortunately, I wouldn't be here today if they actually did it. So, your mileage may vary. Some good quotes, you can say them to your manager when he's complaining about you. You say, well, before you react, stop and think. Anyway, the first question that comes to mind with multi-cloud, and it's already a problem if you talk multi-data center, even on-premise, is why are you doing this? Why do you need it? So the number one question, I'm currently running an application services team. So any middleware within RedHat, EMEA, if anybody needs expertise, they call me, right? And my team. My guys do all the work. I only talk. And the key question that keeps coming back, we need active. Everybody wants active. First question, why the fuck do you want it? Because, no. I know it. I'm saying this in a rather funny way, or at least that's what I was hoping. But you get a lot of complexity when you add active. You need state replication. You need all kinds of failure tests. You need, when you do a test, it's way more impactful if you do it when you do it with a single DC, right? And in many cases, when I speak to the customers, I ask, so what is the mean time to recovery that is the border of when your company fails? So how long can you be down before you go out of business? 8 hours, 12 hours, a day, 2 days. It's rarely 15 minutes. And let's be honest, if you do software defined, if you have your procedures well running, and you have enough data center capacity, you can spin up a complete new environment in 15, 20 minutes. So why would you do the complexity? Because if you add complexity, you add more money. Now, I work for a vendor. I'm very happy that you all want active. That makes me a shit ton of money. It does not make your life better. So first of all, the first question I always ask, why do you need it? Yeah? And what else that is very interesting is that most customers have a twin data center setup. They have this for years and years. Yet every cloud has 3 availability zones, or whatever they call it in the lingo of the cloud. Why? Any takers? Well, the cloud thought about split brain problem. Your twin data center setup does not handle a split brain very well. Yes, I know we have VMware cloud or live migrations. We have all kinds of things to replicate data. But in the end, if you have a twin data center setup and one side goes down and the other still up, and the second comes back up again, who's going to lead? How do you make that distinction? Spoiler alert, you can't. Right? That's the whole premise of the split brain problem. So you need 3. So who has a triple data center setup? Yeah. Oh, wait, yeah, there's one guy. Good. Well done. You did well. Your management actually listened. Good job, man. But here's the story of our lives. In many cases, when we do an active, what we're creating is a lot of work, a lot of complexity for relatively low return on investment. which is one of the reasons why I like cloud, because there it's native in a triple data center setup. You already get some benefits that you don't have with a double data center setup. Good. Then we have no spoon. Oh, sorry, no, that's the original picture. One of the things that I also have to explain to all of my customers, there is no 100% up and 100% available. That's just not going to happen. It's mathematically proven that we cannot do this today. Maybe at some point, maybe with quantum mechanics and all the shit that I have no clue about. But at the moment, we cannot do so. So if you ever get to a discussion with somebody, you don't have to think about this yourself, right? You have the consistency, availability, and partition tolerance theorem, or Brewer, as the guy is actually named that thought of this idea. But we'll have to make a distinction between consistency and availability, and we have to make a good decision about it. And yes, you can play with partition tolerance and see how much discrepancy your application can survive. But going, so I was at, when I presented this in the USA, and there was one guy coming up to me after my presentation and said, "Can you give this to my management?" I said, "Sure, pay me, I'll come." And they were spending a shit ton, it was a large American oil company, and they were spending a shit ton of money to make it 100% up and 100% available. But when I asked him, so what is the application about? It was, God, what was it again? Some kind of back office system for drillers to calculate how much oil was in a oil field. Absolutely essential for their existence, but not something that needs 100% up and 100% available. Seriously, there's probably one freelancer, and I'm looking at you, Mr. Freelancer, that became very rich of that, right? But the company didn't win. So keep this in mind. Try to see if when you're building something, do you actually want to tangle with this mess? Many times, I would say, no, you don't. So the TLDR, weigh your value versus your complexity, right? So are you buying something in the top right? Sure, maybe it's necessary, right? I don't know if you're maybe there is something that needs to be acute and always needs to be right and everything, but I bet your ass that's less than 0.1% of your use cases. So this is an interesting premise to start off with. So, what is the first pitfall? People are going to the cloud because it's cheaper. Spoiler alert, it isn't. So, what we're seeing in practice, and this is actually it's an old article, I need to look up the way back machine link to it, because it actually isn't available under that link anymore. But I still like the premise of this point, right? So when people are talking about cloud consumption and cloud migration cost, they're looking a lot like on the technology level. They're talking a lot about even paying vendors. We have many teams. Microsoft does this really, really, really well. I have less experience with AWS because apparently AWS doesn't care that much about the Netherlands. That's fine, all good. But they help customers get into the public cloud. But when you get into the public cloud, that means that you need to enable your sales force to actually, your workforce to actually understand what they're doing. And you need to readopt your procedures. You need to readopt everything, right? So what we found is that in many cases, the labor cost is half the spend of your transition to the public cloud. And if you don't think about that, then there's a problem. So this is an interesting one to give you. And what we see in practice is that when you talk about migration of old systems into the public cloud, people don't bother. These applications are better off dying in the data center. And then the new stuff is built on top of the public cloud. there can be value in both. So, an interesting premise. Size does matter in IT. I don't want to comment on anything else. What you see is that we suck. We suck at right sizing. All of us here. Nobody's not to blame, right? Because in practice, about 80% of in-house data centers have the other one, way more server capacity than necessary. And we see this actually, there's actually two main reasons that we can identify for it. One is we actually do suck in right sizing, because how many times did your project manager come to you and say, so how much power do I need to run this application? And we're going like, I think, right? Let's be honest, right? Yes, if you're lucky, you're allowed to do a load and stress test, and you can make a better assumption. But in the end, it's a guesstimate, right? That's the best we can do. The other reason is actually, I was in a presentation. The guy was a CTO at one of the big British banks with a German name, so everybody knows who's there. And he was explaining they made the process to get new hardware so complex that everybody just ordered the world. So they actually had a twice as expensive data center than anybody else, simply because they thought, you know what, it takes us 6 months just to get a server, we'll just buy the biggest one they got. And not one, but 10. And what do you get? You get a mess, right? So on-premise, we suck at it, right? So what is the typical management thing to do? Is to create a new function, make them responsible for solving our mess, right? Good stuff. So what do you see? 80% of organizations will using cloud services, but actually I'm seeing it on-premise as well, will get a dedicated FinOps person. Please do this yesterday, because we see that we suck. But public cloud, it's not actually doing better. So this was a research, I linked everything on the bottom. And by the way, you get the slides. I'll make a PDF out of it, give it to Katja, and Katja will send it out to all of you. So, or find me on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever have you not. But if you look at it, so Gartner did the research and said then these mistakes happen today in the public cloud as well. And sometimes it's really, really stupid mistakes. So buddy of mine is working in a bank, right? He called me up and said, hey, Roel, I just need to vent. Okay, hey, I thought, hey, more material, give me. So he started explaining. They were using Azure. This mandatory, well, they first started with AWS, and then mandatory had to move to Azure. The politics, don't get me started on that one. But the guy went like, so security called us up, or rang us, or called us. They rang us and said, hey, we need to understand the load balancer traffic to our apps. So he was responsible for about 200 apps. And security called him and said, we want to create a label on the load balancer for every app behind it. Azure, at that point, supported 50 labels per load balancer. So he had to buy 4 load balancers, which is about the most expensive thing you can buy in Azure, just so he could satisfy security to use the labels. The performance of those 4 machines was utilized by 0.1% each. He could have installed 4 Nginx, done all kinds of magic for that money. They didn't care. They wanted the traceability. So, and here comes the absolutely, I'm still angry about this. Instead of doing something about this horrible architecture, they instead called Microsoft and have them adopt their cloud to this particular use case. So we went from a hosting with third parties like my evil overlord Blue Mother organization, and we went to cloud because cloud would not adopt to idiocy of our customers, right? That's what I loved about cloud. Cloud does not adopt to your organization adopts to cloud, or at least that's the whole premise. And now we're seeing that they're still doing, never mind. Anyway, so back to my original point. So what you see is that organizations make decisions that have big impact on money, and nobody is aware unless they really, really dive into this. And what we see is that the procurement officers that we work with on a day-to-day basis are not equipped to do this. So it's another pitfall that we can identify. So cloud will save our souls. No. No. So first of all, let's talk about cloud adoption. So I had an organization, another bank. So as I told you, I walked around a lot of FSI customers, and they said, our plan is everything in the public cloud. Okay, sure. Why? Yeah, that's better. Yeah, why? But that was their plan. That was actually their plan, because when you really start pushing in it, they said, well, our data centers cost money, and at some point they're out of date, and then we have to revise them, and we just buy the public cloud that's easier and cheaper. Well, sorta, kinda. But what we see, and this is actually a quote from Gartner here in the bottom left, is that many customers are building a plan to go to the cloud, and then they forget everything we learned. So, no agile, no Kanban, whatever methodology you're using to actually adjust on the fly, they forget all about it. They go complete waterfall. So they carve their plan out in stone, like Moses up in the mountains, and then they give it to the developers and then go. Yeah, you fail, right? It's that simple. You're gonna fail because, hey, everything changes in the meantime. What we also see is that, like with that bank, they want to move everything to the cloud, but it does not make sense. Right? I'll get to some of the points why I feel that it does not make sense. One of the things, as a spoiler, is data. That's a big problem. But in and of itself is some applications have a different life cycle. Some applications have. So I'll do an example. Schiphol, one of my old customers back in the day. Schiphol Airport, for the ones who don't know it, it's one of the biggest airports in Europe. They were thinking about doing an active system to see if the plane actually arrived at the gate, right? And they had a really good plan. I loved it. It was so innovative. They put up cameras at all the gates, and then they would use AI. And they trained the AI module in Azure, and then because you need dynamic capacity to train an AI model. And then they brought it back on-premise, and then on-premise it would run actually. And hey, that makes sense, right? That's exactly how you're supposed to use the cloud. You use the cloud for dynamic and capacity and innovative stuff, and then you use what is relatively static, namely the run of the model, on-premise. You know what they did? None of that. What they did is they reduced the resolution of the camera. So you get really big pixels, and then the computer already understands the big pixels. I mean, we're over-engineering quite a bit. And what you see is that if you really look at your application landscape, you'll find that in many cases, the application is either too old or not even supported, or there's a different reason to say, you know what, leave that one on-premise. So, yeah, and the last quote is obviously don't just say we'll move everything to the cloud. Please just don't. Anyway, good. Plan. So going off half-cooked, one of my favorite ones. So if you ever get the opportunity to walk a tightrope, don't do that one. Don't go off half-cooked. Have a plan. So, yep. let's not do that. Good. So this is a question I get a lot, or sorry, that I ask a lot. You know what? I'll do it like this. Is people say, yeah, the cloud is faster, better, cheaper, more efficient, compared to what? So when I ask my customers, hey, what do you need to put a change live? Many don't know the full story. You get parts of the story depending on who you talk to, but it's not that clear what the whole story is. So I actually had an insurance customer, hey, it's not always a bank in FSI, and that insurance customer spent time on creating an overview of what parties they would need to put a change on the website. So nothing special, right? Just a simple content change on the website. 11 parties. They needed 11 different organizational parts to put a change live. And lo and behold, 8 of them were in constant state of war rooms because there was all kinds of priorities coming out and the house was on fire, right? But what this customer did is they assessed their current situation and started to see how, for instance, cloud adoption, but also other changes could actually fix their problem. So they're actually making a change based on what they know. If I had a penny for every customer that did that, I would have a buck. The rest is still trying to make a change based on a general idea. Hey, if we go to the cloud, we don't have all the problems we have on premise. Well, the problems on premise started from a need, and there's nobody that went into the IT and said, "I'm going to block everything," right? So, if you have the right assessed situation, you can actually put in a target of, I need to do X better to make my journey worthwhile. And I'm truly sorry to say that's still not happening everywhere, to say the least. So what I see that happens is that customers don't always see what success looks like. This particular example, I like this one a lot. We got a lot of flack for this one in particular because it's a military example. But if you see it in the picture in the top, this was their development process. So just don't look at the details because nobody wants to know that much details. But Lockheed Martin, to put a change into the joint in the F-22 Raptor, they needed to walk through this process. And what we did is we helped them assess their process, and we changed this process for them. And now the new quote is, in dev today, in the air tomorrow. And they actually are achieving this, right? And he got a great applause for this, and I think it is. But there's nothing in there that says technology. There's nothing in there that says you need cloud. What you need is understanding where you're going wrong and fixing that problem. And cloud can absolutely be a really good factor to make this happen, right? It's way easy, or in most clouds, it's way easier to start off from source control and have everything deployable with a push of the button, right? Let's be honest. Or on-premise, you need to file a ticket in ServiceNow, and then you need to pray to the monkey gods, and then you need to carve out a goat, and then in 6 months you have what you need. Let's be honest, I've been there. I would say focus on what's the process like and how can we solve that, and then you can achieve this on premise, on cloud, on wherever you want to do. You don't even need Kubernetes, and that's coming from somebody that's from Red Hat, right? So I will probably be punished when I get home. So next one, number 4, data. My favorite thing. Good. When you start thinking about multi-cloud adoption or even multi-data center architectures, and we talked about it a little bit with the CAP theorem already, you start to talk about, okay, I can build my app, right? We can build apps relatively easy to be ready in for microservices or regular services or even a Lambda or function as a service kind of architecture. That's not the problem. It's the database people. Oh, wait, sorry, no. Joking aside, it's the data that matters, right? Is the system of record that we're using able to go with us? And in many cases, the answer is yes. Yes, you absolutely can use your data system of record inside inside the cloud or inside whatever you have as a third party that arranges your system. But there are external factors you need to take in here. So you talk about, so the bank in question that wanted everything into the public cloud, they got an email from the Dutch National Bank and said, no, strategy gone. It wasn't much, but it's still gone, right? So what I found is that if you really want to make a success of your strategy of public cloud adoption, or even if you have a hosting provider, then understanding what your data gravity is for the application that you want to use makes a metric ton of difference. And in fact, also, one of the things that I had with shall I name them? Yeah, well, fuck it. Schiphol was that they asked access from their own premise to the public cloud. Well, spinning up the environment and making sure that everything is done was done in 3 months. And then we had to wait another 6 months until we got approval to open up the link between the public data center and our premise and find somebody that maintained it, right? That kind of stuff is something you want to discuss beforehand, because if you beforehand talk to a CEO or CIO, they can accelerate your progress a lot. But most of them have no clue what you're talking about when you're talking about these topics. So there lies a responsibility for all of us to also understand their language and for them to understand ours a little bit, for what we need from them. And in this particular scenario, it took way too long. So what is another pitfall? I would say data gravity. Please, please, please pay attention to this one as well. And it's not just about the customer-related data. So do it, quick guess. What's the one on last? Observability. At the top right, monitoring. And then the last one? Logging. Yes, I couldn't find it. I needed a picture from, obviously, as a Red Hatter, I can't use copyrighted stuff. So I needed a picture of logging, and nobody wanted to make one, and I was too lazy to make my own. So I found one for logging, just a different kind. No, but let's be honest. In our world, and especially if you really start doing the cloud well, having insights in trends of your data, including auditing, logging, monitoring, and all the beautiful data that comes with that, that is worth money. And if you start thinking about moving from data center to data center, from cloud to cloud, this data needs to go with you. Now, I don't know if you ever asked for a quote for your cloud provider to get out of it, but it's pretty expensive. It's free. I looked in the 3 major cloud providers. Going into them is absolutely free. But if you go out, there's a couple of cents per gigabyte. Well, let's run a Kubernetes cluster for, say, a year, and just the simple logging from Kubernetes. I'm not even talking about the application. If you want to export that, hey, good luck for your bank account. I wish it well. So this is definitely an area where I think you should pay attention as well. So this one is not popular in Red Hat, I can tell you that one. But containers and Kubernetes are fool's gold. Yeah. So I'm doing containers, I'm doing Kubernetes, I'm portable. Yeah, no. Again, you get the slide. I have a high-res version of this. You can print it out and put it on your wall in your home, right? So here's the thing. when you start talking about portability, we need to start talking about what do you want to port? Do you want to port the full stack? Do you want to port part of the stack? What do you want to keep? What do you want to give away? And to understand why would we need it? So again, it comes back to the original point. What is the value of designing for portability? So obviously from a Red Hat perspective, we say use OpenShift, it works everywhere. And yes, that is true. And yes, it's a beautiful solution. I still think it's one of the best solutions we made. But the key point is you need to design for portability if you need it. And if you don't need it, why add this burden? And this is the key question. And yes, absolutely, containers made stuff way more portable, and Kubernetes makes stuff even more portable, and it's really fun, and it's awesome, and it's wonderful technology. But what about your procedures, your knowledge? And it's procedures, I mean, look at the simple things, right? So we talked about logging and monitoring, right? But your security procedures, how portable are your security procedures when you take them from AWS and start talking about Azure? Or you talking about Alibaba. I have one of the last customers I did before I went to FSI was a retail customer. And they have a loyalty system. So think saving cards and bonus points and all the wonderful shit that they have in retail to make you buy there. That needs to run as close to the customer as they can. So they go to Alibaba in China, they go to Amazon in the US, here in Europe, Azure is actually the king of the roost. So they needed to be stuff really portable. But they had the same issue as this gentleman there on his phone with the green shirt. I'm calling you out for 2 reasons, but no, don't worry. What they needed is to understand what happened in their environments. And they had to link those 3 environments together, and they have an overview picture of those. That adds a lot of complexity. But for them, that's their core business. For them, that's worth it. You're not them. So think about it, right? Think, do I need this complexity? Do I need this portability? But when you do talk about the ones on the right as well. Because it's not about the Kubernetes container. It's not about your bloody app. It's about everything, including the app. Yeah? Another favorite of mine. We just buy some tech. It solves all of our problems. Yeah, no. So I love the left one. It's actually an old slide, but so back in the I was selling OpenShift version 2, and just to put it in perspective, OpenShift version 2 was not built on Kubernetes at all, right? We had our own system with gears and cartridges that basically did the same thing, but built on a different technology, wasn't scalable. And I still thank the guys that made the decision a lot that they went for Kubernetes at some point. But what did we see when Kubernetes became ubiquitous is that they crammed horrible things into containers. I mean, a WebSphere 4 GB web server was nothing, right? It was a simple container. Fundamental flaws like these always win from tech. So when the next time somebody comes up to you and says, hey, we are using technology XYZ, it's totally the shit. It allows me to go wherever I want to go. Hit them hard because they need to wake up. Smell the roses, yeah. And let's be honest, we are way past do it yourself. Yeah, I still come across people that want to do it yourself. I love it as personally because I'm an engineer. At the heart, at least. I know I'm a manager now, but I'm still an engineer at heart. I like to see how stuff runs. I like to understand how stuff runs. But in my working life, I don't have time for this. I don't even have time to write documentation, or at least that's what I told my project manager every time that I spoke to him or her. But do it yourself is interesting as a concept to understand what you're playing with, but we just don't have time for this. So please, please, please stop doing that. Use one of the platforms, much better. because you want to avoid that frustration in the bottom, right? And thankfully, I never did that. So, I think. This one is something that is dear to my heart. On the right, it's the Open Practice Library. It's a open source repository of best practices you can use to actually do some of the things that I talked about, like optimizing your procedures. They're talking a lot about starting at the end, for instance, on how you define a starting point and where you want an outcome. Then you draw a circle, and then you say what is the likely side effects of that, and then you do a bigger circle and says what's the worst case that can happen, and then you zoom back to your milestones. It's a really nice and powerful way to, instead of articulate from where you want to go next to to get to nirvana, you start with nirvana and start thinking backwards, which is a way more efficient. There's signs underneath it. They all explain that there. It's a really good repository. But what we see is, in essence, is that 99% of the problems we have, and yes, I'm exaggerating, is all about communication. It's not about technology. Never is. Right? So who's older than my 42? Just a quick show of hands. Yeah, 2 gentlemen. So I'm going to directly address you. Didn't they tell you back in the 1990s, guesstimate, right? In the 1990s, that technology would save everything and would make everything better and it would solve all our problems? They did, right? And we still have the same problems. Yes, we changed the scale of them, and we're impacting more, and that is absolutely something that technology did for us. But we're still having the same communication problems. I still need to explain to my manager that this sprint where I'm fixing the bugs is not an optional thing, right? Reducing technical debt is never popular. Nobody wants to pay for that shit. But it's essential, right? Still communication, right? That simple. Anyway. Next one, blockers. So you see security officer, it's a most well-known example of being a blocker in any project, but you can put any non-functional, or non-functional, that sounds more evil than I meant it, but non-developer function, you can put it ops here, you could do all of these folks, CISO, your security officers, but also your networking folk, you name it, right? Everybody's a blocker except for us awesome developers, right? We get shit done, right? It's not true, but never mind, right? What we see in practice is that organizations cannot keep up with the technology changes. Technology changes exponentially. But organizations change logarithmically. Jesus, what a word. So what we see in practice, and that's what I would try to articulate with the example in the right, how effective do you think those chains are to safeguard what we have blocked there? Not at all, right? So what do I see in practice is that when we invite security folk, or you name whatever function they have that you need to invite to the table, they have not gotten the same level of education as we did in many cases. So they're trying to install an agent in a production Kubernetes cluster. Well, the first one that gets one past me gets shot because you don't install anything in production at all. There's no agents, there's no monitoring in the Kubernetes space because that's an access factor, and that's yet another security risk. So you just don't, right? It's what you do is obviously you capture some of. Anyway, never mind. Let's stop when I'm still ahead. The point is, what we need to do is to start talking to each other and start feeling them. What are you? So the big question I want to give you is when somebody comes up to you and says you need to do that. So what? So what? If you can explain me why I should do this, then I will. But in many cases, the answer is because we always do it like that. What are you going to do with that one? How are you going to? Yeah, we're always going to do that. But do keep in mind, you can't just say, yeah, but that's outdated, or you don't get it. Because if you were the other side, and you would get that answer, what do? Oh, really? So, what is the point that I'm trying to make here? Is that in many cases, if we spend the time to understand the other side, and we explain what the options they have, then we're closing the feedback loop. And if we're closing the feedback loop, we can actually get shit done. Yeah? Sorry. Command and control, spinning out of control. So previously this chapter was named governance, and this is the second to last. So you guys actually did well. So here's the thing. We were the new kingmakers. This was hot hype in 2018, it probably still is. Coding might be the closest thing we have to superpower. All the developers should have the power. Developers should be able to look in production. Developers should own their application they deploy in production. But most of the developers I know are fucking cowboys. So why do you want to do that, right? That's the pathway to destruction. Because we don't hold ourselves to proper standards. If you ever get the chance, well, he went off his rockers a little bit, but Uncle Bob, what's his real name again? Bob, whatever. Yeah. He did a presentation that I never forget in, say, 2015, 2014, and he explained that we as developers should have standards. And when the next time our boss comes to us and says, hey, I know there's a technical debt, but we need to release this because, hey, it needs to be released tomorrow, say no. And I know it's hard. It really is. But if we are kingmakers, then we need to do so. Yeah? So a pitfall in this particular scenario is that this becomes too much true. Or, even worse, this becomes true. So these are some articles, right? GitOps is, I love GitOps, don't get me wrong. But no ops? So we just don't do operations? Now that's gonna go fun. Right? No checks and balances at all, right? We just automate, outsource, and just everything is gonna be fine. Yeah, no. The guy on the right is there for a reason. And so, again, this is, if you talk about governance and compliance and security and all the other supporting functions to what we're trying to do, then a general pitfall around this is if we don't close the feedback loop, we will fail. We'll hit the 8 o'clock news or whatever primetime news is in this particular area. I mean, in the Netherlands, it's 8 o'clock. If you're in the 8 o'clock news, you never go back, right? So trust comes on foot and leaves on horseback is the Dutch saying for this one. So think about this, right? And think about how you can be a positive impact in this one, because it's a definite pitfall. And I see that the screen is slightly compressed. What I like a lot is Google has, for free, created some of their SRE books. I highly recommend everybody to read it if you didn't do it yet. If you did, you're awesome. Keep up the good work. But what is SRE about? What is DevOps about? Oh, communication. It's all about communication. And again, where there's lack of communication, there's an abundance of errors. So, and it doesn't matter if you're doing that single cloud, multi-cloud, multi-DC, I don't give a rat's ass. If you don't communicate, you will fail. Cool. And then the last option, that's the bonus question. Your ass is on fire. You're having a shitty day. And that's because you don't have a plan B. And in fact, it wasn't even originally intended to put in this document, but I liked it a lot. I found an article, this is actually Gartner this year, published an article that if you don't have an exit strategy, you shouldn't even start, right? And KPMG on the bottom is basically the same quote with different words. It's a longer quote, but I didn't have room on the slide. But simple example, we had a customer, was a retail customer, different one, and they went all in on Amazon, right? Amazon was great. Amazon was an awesome company. They provided well service. They were really happy. And then Amazon bought wholesale foods. So from one day to the next, instead of them being a partner, they became a competitor. And then the CIO said, yeah, but we can't work with a competitor. We should go to Azure. And then in a drop of a dime, they had to go from Amazon to Azure. So can you imagine? They were happy with Amazon. There was no reason to change. And now there was something that happened, and then poof. So they cut themselves quite deeply on that migration effort. Yeah, there was a bank in the UK, got a new CIO, and the new CIO, well, we don't know why he made the decision. I always joke that he went golfing with the other guy, but they switched clouds as well on the drop of a dime. And hundreds of millions of pounds, so it's even worse than euros or dollars, right? Went through the drain just to migrate from one cloud to the other because of a CEO change. No, the average shelf life of a CEO is about 2 to 4 years. So if you have to do that every 2 to 4 years, that gets expensive fucking fast, right? So here's the thing, when you start with a cloud, enjoy it. It's a wonderful experience. I'd rather work on a cloud than on-premise. But be aware, you need to be able to get out as well. Huh? And with that, I have a small recap list. So first of all, don't just do it for the cost. Obviously, the title is very provocative for a reason, obviously. But here in the recap, this is what I'm trying to say. Do not do it for the cost. Do it because you have a good reason to need that flexibility, that agility, or there's a reason. So another customer, it was a German insurance company. They went to the public cloud. And they were very successful. They could fire their 250 Linux engineers, and they could do it with 4 script kiddies. What their words, not mine, right? They maintained their environment. So it was massively more efficient. But what they found is that particular cloud provider, when they went from 0 to 1 million, they basically weren't on their radar. When they went from 1 million to 10 million per year, they were called every day. Hey, do you need more? Do you need more? Is there anything else we can do for you? When they hit the 10 million mark, the reps disappeared again because there was no reason, because where are you going to go? You were so stuck, you couldn't go. So do it for the right reasons. In the end, 4 script kiddies are more easily trained, more easily found than 250 well-known Linux engineers. I mean, it's a skill, right? It's something that you need to train for. But in the end, the only reason why they were better off in the cloud was because of labor costs. Now, see the cloud as a tool, not a destination. I don't think I have to explain that one, right? It's not the end. The cloud is not an end goal. It's a tool that can help you be more effective, or it can cost you a shit ton of money, right? So be aware. Establish a comparison before you change, right? Again, to recap, if you don't know where you're coming from, then you will not be able to articulate what your benefit you achieved by going there. So that's what I meant with that one. Key to agility will be data, an extensive data set. So again, so you need to think not just about customer-facing data, you need to think about all relevant data, and where that data can or cannot go will determine where we can go. Portability is broader than technology. It's all about communication. It's all about data. It's all about all the other bits. And technology, Kubernetes, containers, you name it, it's not going to solve our problem in and of itself. Yeah, cool. Supporting functions should be enabled and modernized. Supporting functions is a bit much nicer to say than non-functionals, but yeah, still, right, non-functionals. Governance and ownerships, it's a complex balance, so you need to think about yes, you need to enable your developers. I had the Dutch tax office. Developers are not allowed to even touch production, and even if ops pulls logging data from production, you're not allowed to look into it. So they need to tell you what failures are in the log, and then you need to guess why they occurred, right? There's a reason why the Netherlands has a tax office problem. So that one, obviously, you need to strike a balance, because if you make the developers the kingmakers, I'm sorry, we're too much of a cowboy. Where you see too much quality differences. So there needs to be balance in the force. And then last but certainly not least, get an access strategy before you begin. Yeah. And overall, this is my final statement. Let's just fucking talk to each other, please. Thank you.